ProControl is Digidesign's modular control surface for music recording and post-production. It gives you direct access to every software function within Pro Tools. It maintains the look and feel of a traditional, world-class console, yet offers much more, and that's the total integration with Pro Tools. ProControl can be expanded up to 48 faders and also include an edit pack, a dedicated module for surround panning and editing, with over 70 function keys, high-resolution output metering, and a custom QWERTY keyboard and trackball. Let's take a closer look at ProControl and each of its components. The ProControl main unit is the foundation of any ProControl system. From here you can add expansion modules to create the size of control surface you require. As you'll notice, the main unit can be broken down into three major sections: the fader channel strip area, the meter bridge, and the main editing section. We're going to take a closer look at each of these, starting with the meter bridge. The meter bridge is at the top where you'd expect it to be, but you'll notice we have dual VU metering for each individual channel. So regardless of whether it's an audio track, an auxiliary input, or a master fader, you get mono or stereo metering up here. Moving across, we then have our counter display, and we can change all the counter modes through all of Pro Tools ruler settings: timecode, bars and beats, minutes and seconds, and feet and frames. Moving down from the meter bridge, we then enter the channel strip and fader area. And this is the point where we access all of the mixing parameters of a Pro Tools TDM system. We start off with our Digi faders. These are our own patented, motorized, touch-sensitive faders that can work individually or within relative groups. Above that, an 8-character scribble strip, which can display the track name as we've named it in the Pro Tools session, or a whole host of information relating to that individual channel or track. Moving up from there, we have our mute keys, which can work on individual channels or on active groups. And the same is true of the solo function. We can solo individual channels or again active groups. And we include a solo clear light. This gives the ability to clear down all our solos across the session. Moving up from that, we then have our automation status for each individual channel, so we can see our read, write, or update modes that we have the channel in. Down by the faders, we also have a global mode and automation enable for the entire session. So we have the ability to globally set our automation status, or actually safe out areas of the mixer that we don't want to actually update during a touch or a latch pass. Moving up from that, we then have a rotary controller in each channel, and these can control a whole host of parameters. We can assign our inputs to a channel or our outputs. We can also view any of our 5 sends that we have set up within that session. Once selected, we can simply, let's say, for a Q mix, adjust the levels, and then decide if that's going to be pre or post fader, or select if we actually want to mute that send. Moving up from there, our insert plugin or DSP assign area, so we can view any EQ plugins that are assigned on a channel, any dynamics plugins that are assigned on a channel, or even view any of our inserts assignments over here on the center section. And finally, at the top of the channel, we then have the record arm keys. So whether we're working on an audio track or a MIDI track, we can actually record arm it directly from ProControl. Moving across, we then enter the main editing section, and this can be broken down into 3 further areas. The main editing section lives here. Starts off with our transport controls, jog shuttle wheel for scrubbing and shuttling inside a session. We then have our dedicated edit modes and dedicated editing tools from inside Pro Tools. We also give you dedicated keys for all the major editing tasks. Above that, we then have something that is unique to ProControl. It's called the channel matrix. And from here in the center section, or the sweet spot of my mixer, I can actually view a whole range of parameters across the entire session. So I can view my mute statuses, my solo status, my record ready status. I can even record arm any of the channels directly from here, no matter where they are in the session. So in complex sessions, I'm not running up and down ProControl or leaving the sweet spot of my stereo or surround image. Now, if I was working just on a single ProControl main unit with 8 faders, I want to be able to view other channels that we have in the session. So down here we have our bank and nudge keys. These allow us to actually bank through layer by layer, showing 8 channels of a time of our session. So we can bank through 1 to 8, 9 to 16, etc. Moving up from the channel matrix, we then have our DSP and plugin editing section. This comprises of 8 rotary controllers and 8 switches. They allow us to access any plugin that we have, view it on screen, and then control those parameters directly from the rotary encoders. We can also easily automate every individual parameter on any plugin directly from the center section. And moving across, we get to the final section of the ProControl main unit. This is the control room monitoring section. And again, this is something you won't find in a standard Pro Tools system. It's actually analog circuitry built into the ProControl main unit to allow you to handle your speaker switching, your monitor sources, and your control room levels. We have the ability to mono, dim, and mute any of our monitors. We have main and alternate speaker independent level controls. We have onboard talkback communication with the talkback key handy right down here by the transport buttons. And we have the ability to control our cue mix going out to a talent or to any musicians that we have in the studio. Now at the moment we're actually running in a surround mode because we're in a surround session. But let's say the next job that we're doing is going to be a stereo session. This whole center section can change mode instantly. So now we're working with a stereo monitor section. So we can now pick up the stereo output of Pro Tools or any of our 2-track tape returns or master sources. Edit Pack is a dedicated module for surround panning and editing within ProControl. It includes 2 motorized touch-sensitive panners, over 70 dedicated function keys, high-resolution output metering, and a custom QWERTY keyboard trackable. Let's begin the overview by having a look at the panners themselves. They're located in the center of Edit Pack, and they control the spatial panning for any channel within Pro Tools itself. They can control individual mono channels, they can control stereo group channels, or if we have stereo tracks, they operate as dedicated stereo panners. They also give us access to every one of the parameters from our pan window inside Pro Tools itself. Moving down from the panners, we then have our custom QWERTY keyboard. This replaces your normal CPU keyboard and mouse and actually has all the dedicated single key focus functions we have available within Pro Tools. We've also given you trackable to the right of that, so again, no need for a mouse pad anywhere near your ProControl itself. Moving up from there, we then have our dedicated edit buttons. These are edit functions that have not necessarily been available before on key command shortcuts. To access these functions, you've typically either had to click on the screen with the mouse or use pull-down menus. We've got ability to control our plugin parameters, automation control, control over MIDI events, control over audio editing, region management and track show hide functions, and then the ability to control creating new tracks, duplicating tracks, importing audio, or even importing entire tracks themselves. We can also change the track size up and down directly from keys now on the Edit Pack itself. Moving across from that, if you're working with machine control, we give the ability to track arm remotely your 9-pin device and also change your various edit modes for the machine control. For example, insert or assemble record control. To the left of that, we give the ability then to actually access your MIDI event lists. So we can now bring up your MIDI event list and see any Foley or any MIDI events that you have in there. This MIDI event list key can also fire out MIDI commands, so there's no need to have a dedicated MIDI keyboard anywhere near your ProControl itself. And lastly, we then have the start, end, and length keys. These allow us to make numerical entry into our selections that we have on the Pro Tools edit page, and we can see them displayed up here on the meter bridge. And finally, our 8-channel output meters. They feature 40-segment high-resolution displays, so you can view any of your surround sound formats down to 1 dB increments. So you can see with the addition of Edit Pack, we now give you complete control over our multi-format surround mixing, and we enhance the speed and the workflow of editing that you have available from Pro Tools. Fader Pack is the fader expansion module for ProControl. Each module contains 8 channel strips, and we can add up to 5 fader packs to a ProControl main unit, giving a total of 48 faders. Now, as you can see, the fader pack is identical to the channel strip area of a ProControl main unit. So we have the same fader control, channel muting, channel solos, send control, input-output routing, and plugin assignments. The units actually connect via a single Ethernet cable back to the ProControl main unit and are physically held together with brackets mounted underneath. Now, we've actually built a 48 fader ProControl here, but you can see that across the console we duplicate our master record functions, input-output routings, send controls, solo clears, automation suspend, and our automation modes and enables. So even though we may be anywhere on the console, we're no more than an arm's reach away from any of these critical functions. So with the modular nature of ProControl and the fader packs, you can build a control surface to meet your facility's requirements without compromising functionality. Here we are at the rear of a ProControl main unit. This is the heart of any ProControl system. Now, as a control surface, no audio signals actually pass through the channel strips on this or any of the other ProControl modules. However, a ProControl main unit contains a traditional control room monitoring section. These three 25-pin D-sub connectors give you access directly to that monitor section. So first of all, we need to connect the audio analog outputs of our Pro Tools interfaces. A simple connection like this with the D-sub connector and the XLRs or maybe TRS connections, depending on which Pro Tools audio interfaces that we're actually using. Secondly, we need to connect our studio monitoring system. Again, both stereo or surround, depending on the format that we're working within. We also connect here our master tape returns, and finally our external talkback and listen back circuits. Moving along from those connectors, we then see the gain controls for those external listen back and talkback mics. But probably the most important connector across the rear here is the high-speed Ethernet connection. That's how ProControl talks to Pro Tools in our machine room. If we're using a single ProControl main unit such as this, one Ethernet crossover cable is the only connection from here back to our Pro Tools system itself. If we've expanded it, we're using multiple fader packs or an edit pack, then we require a simple Ethernet hub. All the modules plug into this hub, and then again, one connection from here then takes us back to the machine room and to the Pro Tools system itself. Then finally, moving across from that, we then have switch 1 and switch 2. These are general purpose inputs directly to the ProControl main unit. So using a utility page in ProControl, we can assign these individually to playback, to record for doing remote punch-ins, and even for actually setting external talkback switching. So you can see, the beauty of using control surfaces is the installation and wiring costs are minimal, regardless of the size of the ProControl system. And because it's using high-speed Ethernet, you'll never see a slowdown in performance, and the control surface will always retain a traditional console feel. In this module, we're going to take a look at ProControl in an everyday session to see how it improves the speed and efficiency of your workflow within Pro Tools. Let's start with the simple but sometimes high-pressure task of recording. We've been asked to redo a voiceover for this TV commercial. So we created a new track to accept the voiceover. It's down here labeled New VO, and we're going to set it up for a typical record session. First thing we need to do is assign an input. Into assign mode, into input. Now I've previously labeled all my inputs with the relevant connections to the different microphones that I have available in the studio. So I can just dial through on my rotary encoder and choose the microphone I want. In this case, a Neumann U87. It's set up. We can now record on the track. Now let's add some EQ to the record monitor path. We select EQ. I can bring it up on screen if I like, but I can control it directly from the 8 rotary controllers. So let's just dial in a little bit of high-level lift and maybe just a bit of peak within that voiceover itself. Now we need to think about creating the Q mix. I can simply take the stereo mix that's coming out of Pro Tools at the moment and automatically assign it to the Q mix in the headphones. However, in this case, I want more control over the Q mix itself. I want to create an independent Q mix using Pro Tools' copy to send function. I have a stereo send setup already, which we've labeled Q. I could go through and manually control it, or as we said, we're going to use the automatic copy to send function to take the mix on our channel faders and move it instantly into that Q mix. There's our copy to send on screen. We're going to route it to send E, which is the send that we're using, and there we go. We instantly have that Q mix. Now again, we can edit it directly from the rotary encoders, or use the fader flip command to bring that down onto our main faders, so we then have real control over the mix and then return it back to the Q send itself. So there we go. We're now pretty much ready to go as soon as the talent arrives. So we've recorded that new voiceover in. Let's go and clean it up. We have the actual line of dialogue on screen. Let's go ahead and make the track slightly bigger so we can see exactly what we're doing. I'm going to remove the dead air between those two lines of dialogue, so simple editing. Use the scrub shuttle wheel, drag through the first line of dialogue that's there, find our in point, and then hold the shift key until we find the end of the edit point. Then using our dedicated edit functions, I now actually delete out that piece of dead air, and remember that's all non-destructive. Let's say I have actually clipped the end of the breath on that first line. This time, I'm going to correct that using our Smart tool. I call it up through our Edit tool menu, and then using our trackball over here, I can go in and maybe correct the beginning of the line of dialogue, or in this case, actually correct the mistake I made earlier, which was then pull out the breath, and then we're just going to dial in a simple fade out towards the end. All achieved directly from ProControl. Now let's show you something a little bit more advanced. We're going to spot some sound effects and resync a sound effect that's already laid in. This is the piece of picture that we're looking at. We can actually nudge backwards and forwards, and we see the character comes down the stairwell and lands. The sound effect that I'm after, I can search for. It's called a big drop. And as soon as I finish searching, we see it appears in the actual region list itself. Now, each ProControl main unit and fader pack has the same keyboard modifiers that we have on the standard QWERTY keyboard. So the control drag, which actually snaps my sound effect directly in the timeline, still works even from a ProControl or a fader pack. Now I could lean over and actually solo that individual channel to audition it, but I'm actually going to use the channel matrix over here. So I solo up the track and let's play it through and see how it sounds. Now we can see underneath there was another sound effect there originally. In fact, this picture track has been recut or re-edited. So we need to resync and tighten up that sound effect to the new pictures. Very simply, I'm now going to go in, choose the track itself. First of all, I'm going to solo it, again using the channel matrix. With the scrub wheel, find the very beginning of that sound effect. I'm going to mark a sync mark in that particular position, and then simply go up, find the frame, and then using the actual single key functions that we now have on Pro Tools 5, we have the ability to snap to head or snap to sync point. So I could go to head, or in this case, we need to go to the sync point that's there. So let's audition those two sound effects and see how they look against picture. Now, with the speed of editing that we can achieve from ProControl, it allows us to try out ideas very quickly. For instance, the director has asked us to create an atmosphere loop over a certain section of the commercial. So to do this, all we do is simply choose a small loop out of the sound effect that we want, copy it to the clipboard, and then we're going to shrink down those two tracks and leave them up the top. We then need to create a new stereo track, and then we're going to select across that stereo track for the length of this final scene. It's actually where the coin rolls into the new style bank, which finishes roughly at the end of that street. So we can see that selection on screen. All we have to do now is hit Fill Paste. It automatically loops the sound effect that we've got off the clipboard and then applies crossfades between each of those regions. We can then zoom in so we can see them on screen using the E key on our command focus. But what we're looking at is individual regions. So now we use our consolidate command to then turn that into a single manageable region. Now, if we play that through and then found out the director wasn't happy with what we did, we can then just use the undo key to then step through our editing to get back to where we were, and then maybe try out something different. So we finished editing the effects. Now let's go through and mix that voiceover in with the rest of the commercial. Here's the new voiceover track, and I'm going to apply some dynamic automation, so I place the fader into write mode using my automation status. I then have my stereo music groups and my stereo effects groups. So I'm going to go through, place them into an update mode, but as there's a previous mix in there, I'm actually going to place them into trim mode. I can also change the display mode here, so I can now view the amount of delta change or relative change I'm applying to those faders. So let's go through and mix the middle section that we've got on screen.
It can be sent in a variety of directions, so keeping track of it can be difficult, especially if your accounts are divided among different institutions.
So there we go. We've updated the automation, mixed in the new voiceover. Now remember, everything that we do on the control surface can be automated in real time. So we do have the ability with the automation enables to safe out areas of the consoles when we're updating like this. Now, as well as doing a stereo mix, we're also going to do a surround version of this particular commercial. So let's go through and show you how we can do some automated surround panning. We're going to actually write a dynamic surround move on this channel here, Effects Mono. So I need to assign my motorized panners from Edit Pack to this particular channel. I hit Track Select and then dial through till I find Effects Mono, or I can simply just hit Select on the individual tracks. As I choose it, I then have full control of the panning on that track, and I can even bring that up on the pan window of Pro Tools to see exactly what I'm doing. I can change the automation status obviously on the track or also on the panner. So let's place it into automation write mode. I'm just going to solo the track up so I can hear it, and let's actually write the move itself. So a simple move from rear left to front right. Now it's a little bit quick. If I want to update it and maybe do it slightly more accurate, I can hold the shift key, and at this time we're going to update at half speed. And again, I can now play back that automation. We can see it on the joystick panner, or we can see it on screen. So whether we're working in LCRS 5.1 or 7.1, we can just automate the panner for mono or stereo tracks for any channels across the console. So let's say the mix is now finished. We need to deliver it. We can deliver it to DVD, to internet, or even via OMF back to an Avid media composer. To do that, we simply hit our bounce key and then choose the actual file type, format, and even the number of channels that are involved in that bounce, and off we go. So as I mentioned earlier, ProControl truly gives you access to every aspect of the Pro Tools software directly from the surface. We're now running our session in a manner that incorporates the touch and feel of a traditional console, yet retains all the power and integration of Pro Tools. It's all about getting Pro Tools out of the computer and underneath your fingertips.